friends and neighbors. Lewis Varnell here with the History Company. I'd like to welcome you to the third episode of Past in Review, in which we're going to focus on the World War II usage of the park and Fort Oglethorpe. In 1933, legislation was passed transferring Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park to the control of the National Park Service. Fort Oglethorpe, of course, continued as an active military base, but training was no longer taking place on the actual battlefield. However, when World War II begins, several things happen. One of the permanent party units that was stationed here, the 6th Cavalry, was transferred to, I believe, Fort Knox, Kentucky at the Armor Center because all cav was becoming mechanized at that point. And the park is turned into a German prisoner of war camp that would have been located up around Snodgrass Hill. Very quickly, that POW camp is moved into Fort Oglethorpe proper, off what is now Forest Road. And in 1943, the Women's Army Corps, the WACs, come to Fort Oglethorpe. And they are housed out in the old POW camp. More buildings are built, but the 3rd WAC Training Center exists on the park. And even today, if you go into the woods, you can find foundations for the buildings and for the barracks that still exist. The WACs that come here train on a variety of skills. One of the major things that comes through here is motor transport, so women are taught to be mechanics. If you ever see a movie called Keep Your Powder Dry, which was filmed in 1945, the 3 main ladies in that are here at Fort Oglethorpe training to be truck mechanics. And they've got some really interesting scenes showing Barnhart Circle when it was still part of the Army active base when they do evening retreat. So Fort Oglethorpe has a really unique history with the WACs. In addition to all the women who come through for motor transport training and also for public affairs training, we also have members of the 6888 Postal Unit, which was an all-African-American unit and the only all-African-American WAC unit to deploy overseas. You can see in the exhibit that we have several pieces related to the WAC's arrival in Chattanooga. We have some original newspapers, and various companies and corporations would take out ads welcoming the WACs and also telling them, if it were a department store, for instance, of the fine makeup selection that they had in all the approved WAC colors. Rock City, of course, took out ads and wanted them to come up as tourists. One of the local dairies welcomed them to the area. So it was a big deal for us to become the 3rd WAC training center. If I remember correctly, there are 5 nationwide, and we're number 3 and one of the largest. Now, we have, luckily enough, in our museum collection, a uniform and some other artifacts belonging to Iris Pape, who becomes a WAC. Now, she does not train here at Fort Oglethorpe initially. She goes to basic training somewhere else. But she comes here and is stationed at Fort Oglethorpe while she is in transit to her permanent station, which is Albany, Georgia, where she is working alongside a lot of the men in the Army Air Corps. So she winds up there. When the war ends, the 3rd WAC Training Center, like everything else, is shut down. The park reclaims that ground and turns it back into the battlefield that we know today. Fort Oglethorpe continues as an active post until 1947, when it is declared a surplus post due to really being too small for much training to take place here. When it was a cavalry post, you could ride horses all over the place. Once they became a mechanized armor unit, you really couldn't have tanks dashing across the battlefield and running over monuments. So in 1947, the post closes. In 1949, a committee of citizens came together, looked at the existing infrastructure that was already here from the base, and incorporated the town of Fort Oglethorpe. And that is why we are called Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia today. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Past in Review. And I'm sure we'll have other things to tell you later. And if you get a chance, please come to the store and check this stuff out in person. Thank you very much.